Hey everyone, welcome to ESQ Masterclass. Today we're going to dive into more detail about what the pillars are of starting your law firm, growing your law firm, and sustaining your law firm. You may ask, why is John sharing all this free information? I've learned from other attorneys where they have passed down that information. But I've noticed, of course, you need to have an established relationship with that person to gain that value, gain that mentorship. You should still try to maintain those relationships for sure. But now with COVID-19, it's harder to get out there and meet people, meet new attorneys, and continue that relationship. Unless you're having Zoom happy hour every week. But I have a toddler, so it's a bit difficult with our schedule, even though we're home. Now, the first pillar is your own personal individual goals. What do you want to get out of running your own practice? Because, of course, you could work for someone else and you don't have to deal with having 17 different type of primary responsibilities. So the main question behind this pillar is operating your own law firm going to fulfill your personal goals? Now, the second pillar is team culture. What does that look like for you? Specifically, are you going to have a vision and mission statement? They're not the same thing. And we'll have a separate video about that as well. For us, we recently implemented that in the last 2 to 3 years, and it has been a change maker among other notable changes. Are you gonna have these posted on the wall? Are you gonna train your team about these different statements? For us, it's a guiding principle. It keeps us grounded to know exactly what type of clients and cases that we want, where we can continue to look at that. It will also help us create and follow our key performance indicators, which will also have a separate video about that as well, that goes into more detail. Essentially, having a well-established, fine-tuned team culture will prevent problems. It can prevent drama within your team. And if you prevent drama within your team, that's going to reduce any possible friction with your clients. So essentially, damage control is what we call it. Our next pillar is about marketing. How do you want to attract your clients? Because if you're going to post an ad in the yellow pages, you're likely going to have a volume-based type of practice. When we have volume-based, you're likely going to have possibly need more employees to manage all those calls and or have a virtual assistant to manage those calls. So which will also have a different video about that as well, about whether you should have an employee or a virtual assistant starting out. And of course, depending how you want to conduct your marketing, that depends what your budget is. But just because you spend more money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more clients. So you got to keep track of that. You should maintain metrics on that. You should review it every month so that you can figure out whether where you're putting $500 or $1,000 that month is going to produce clients. Now, of course, if you just spend money in one platform for 1 month, you're not going to get solid results. You're going to have to wait at least I recommend 6 months. Our fourth pillar is about systems and procedures. Now, internally, that's within your team. What kind of system and procedures do you have so that where someone calls in for the first time, what's going to happen next with that caller, even if they don't sound interested? Do you have a follow-up procedure? How soon will that follow-up happen? So that give you an example right there. And then externally, what does that look like for the potential client in terms of should they expect a follow-up call? Do they need to be the one calling back, or when can they provide more documents? What does onboarding look like for a client? How can they pay? When can they pay? And how often can they pay the legal fee, attorney fee? And even communication. What is your communication policy? Because we all know attorneys will get busy, and we want to do right by the client. We have to update them in a timely manner. That's what all the different ethics will require, right? We need to timely update our clients. And when we get into the thick of things with a certain different case, we can forget to update a different client. So you need to have systems and procedures in place so that no other client gets left behind. And a selfish motive is so that you can save your bar license. The fifth pillar is about financial control. How much money do you need to earn per month, per quarter to sustain your own lifestyle. So that goes back to the first pillar. How do you want to live your life? Because that affects how much money you want to earn, right? May also affect the type of clientele or type of cases you want to accept. You need to have a long-term profitability model. So in case you want to take a different type of case, then you can have that cushion for yourself. Or if you want to take more frequent vacations with yourself or your family, your loved ones, then you can take that vacation. But specifically within financial control is you need to find a way to limit your expenses. Now, of course, if you spend $100 here in advertising, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get one case, two cases, or even earn $5,000. But you need to get value and understand what that value is when you're spending that money. I've heard of many law firms that spend X thousands of dollars on SEO, but you may just leave it there and not think about it until a year later has passed when you have to pay the next bill. And then you start scratching your head thinking, did I spend that money appropriately? And by that time, you might just get busy and then say, okay, forget it. I'm just going to pay it again. So you should at least check that every quarter if you're getting any value out of that expense line item. There's many items to focus on within financial control as well, like how to follow up and when to follow up with a client if you have them on a payment plan. And also, do you have a system in place to pay your team or even pay yourself? How often what kind of system do you use to pay yourself? So in terms of the financial control, you need to have strategy about it, because then if you have some strategy behind that, then you know how much you can save and reward your team in the future. You shouldn't willy-nilly reward your team if you haven't set something called key results area and key performance indicators. You should not just reward your team simply because they're still with you and they suffered through their last year with you. We do provide a bonus for sure, multiple types of bonuses. And you want to incentivize your team, but you shouldn't incentivize your team based on standard tasks that are normally part of the job description. And you can allocate other expenses that you may not normally have as an emergency situation. So that goes back to the previous pillar of having systems and procedures in place. And the sixth pillar is about hiring, how to retain your staff and firing. In terms of hiring, you need to have a system in place in terms of the different steps involved. I highly recommend to not have just one step in your hiring process, or not two steps where it's just having that one interview and then the next phone call is saying you're hired. That's not enough steps for you to figure out if they fit within your team culture. And also, conversely, if that potential candidate can figure out if they feel comfortable with your own team. And we'll have, of course, another episode about that as well in the future. You need to have a list of questions, almost like an intake form, as if you're interviewing a potential client. It's the same way. You need to have that type of system. You can't just look at a resume and ask questions related to the resume or what type of tasks there that you need to be completed, because it's not just a task, right? They need to be able to freely communicate if they have any concerns with you. You also need to figure out if they will create drama in your team. You don't want that one person to drag down your entire team, even if it's 6 months later. I know it's going to be difficult for you to figure that out. As long as you have those factors and considerations in place to filter people out sooner than later, then you'll be able to reduce that possibility of having someone to create drama. The best way to retain your team is to show appreciation, is to treat them with respect, of course, treat them as an equal, reward them when appropriate, among many other factors that we'll share in a separate episode. And the part that no one wants to talk about is how to fire one of your team members. It's a difficult thing to do because over time you do grow as a family. But just like your own family, sometimes you wish you could just have some space. And you may feel that for your own team members. But if you were to feel that for a team member, then that really means you need to fire them. And we'll have a separate episode on how to fire someone. and what type of scenarios you do need to fire someone. One other consideration for your team is what tools and resources do you have in place to put them in a better position to be more efficient and to do quality work. Essentially to meet your essentially to meet your KRAs, key result areas, and key performance indicators, KPI. So we'll have a separate episode about what type of tech tools you need for each of these pillars to have a successful practice. We're also going to have guests on the show where they share what policies and procedures, systems, essentially tips and hacks that have worked for them over the years. We're all here to help you not reinvent the wheel. We've all been there when we've had this type of headache, scenario, or situation we just don't want to have to deal with. We've all been there where we've been stressed out about something. And by that point, we wish we had a certain system or policy or procedure in place. If these pillars resonated with you on what you would like to improve on with your law practice, hit the subscribe button down below. And please leave a comment if you have a question or a comment, because we'll try to answer that question in our next slate of episodes. Thank you very much and stay tuned.